Hello, welcome to the Deep 404. Today, the events that is making the headlines around the world, of course, is the Hamas attacks on Israel over the last 24 hours. There are many images and video coming out now of the brutal images of indiscriminate slaying of Israeli families in areas surrounding the Gaza Strip within Israel, and with the resulting Israeli targeted missile strikes on the impoverished buildings of the Gaza Strip itself. This is a long-running conflict in the Middle East. The idea of Israel and Palestine finding peace is something which has been long talked about, but there don't really seem to be any great paths towards that. And what has happened yesterday is only going to solidify those differences further. We haven't seen the end of the Israeli reprisal attacks. They, based upon the rhetoric of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they will continue and will be severe, I would imagine, in their nature, and we will see that inflicted upon the people of Gaza over the coming days and weeks. There are 300 or more reported Israelis has been killed in the last day, and about 1,500 reportedly injured. There are similar numbers of 300 or 250 to 300 Palestinians killed in Gaza by these missile strikes by the Israeli Air Forces, and again similar numbers reportedly injured. There are reports of an unknown but large number of Israeli civilians and IDF, Israeli Defense Forces personnel, having been taken hostage into the Gaza Strip. There are reports that an unknown number of attendees at a Rave music festival outside of Gaza in Israel have their whereabouts are unknown, and that they may well have been taken hostage. Some evidence which seems to corroborate that is the reported confirmation of the identity of the woman whose body was shown naked apart from her underwear in the back of a ute, a pickup truck, dead, her body and limbs at strange and twisted angles, but reportedly due to a distinctive tattoo which was visible on one of her shins. She has been identified as a German woman who was attending the rave. So there are obviously concerns for the other people from that rave who are missing. There is also reports of large numbers of Palestinians having been killed in the missile attacks on Gaza, and in conflicts and skirmishes also even around the West Bank. The conflict itself appears to be growing. If we just take a look at this image here, and spreading to southern Lebanon. So on the map here, which I hope you can see, we have Israel in the darker greyed area here, the Mediterranean Sea to the west. At the bottom here, in the bottom left-hand corner or bottom southwestern corner, is Egypt. And then running north-south to the east of Israel and the Palestinian territories of the West Bank is Jordan, and then Syria up above that. Now, there are reports that Hezbollah, which is a Lebanese-based Shia Islamist group, have claimed responsibility for the shelling and mortar attack on 3 Israeli bases or military positions on the northern Israel, southern Lebanon border. Now, that I know, I saw some information about that just an hour or so ago. I don't know if that's extending, if we're expecting to see more involvement from Hezbollah. So Hezbollah, Shia Islamist group from Lebanon, Hamas are a group from Palestine, Gaza. The Hamas group has like the de facto. They're the de facto governing authority over the Gaza Strip, and they are a Sunni Islamic fundamentalist group. Gaza itself, which you can see, it's this yellow area, this small yellow area here. Gaza, it's roughly 35 kilometers long, the Gaza Strip. It is home to 2 million Palestinians. The West Bank, which is this larger area here of the sort of, if you're looking at the map, the blue and yellowy areas in here. This West Bank area is home to about 3.5 million Palestinians. Gaza has been under a blockade imposed by Israel and Egypt, which limits the products that can be supplied to Gaza and the movement of people out of Gaza for 16 years now. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, their spokesperson has come out and said that the attacks are the natural extension of a people that are seeking to be truly free. And this is an interesting topic, just this topic itself, that I wanted to mention, because it's interesting to see again how easily divided we become over a topic like this. Many celebrities on Twitter, for example, are coming out one way or another. And it's surprising to me that so many of them are coming out so strongly on one side of the conflict. I would have expected, particularly from some of the people who have commented, to have seen a more balanced take, a balanced approach on why this has happened. Much like we have previously had from the West, the narrative that Russia's attack on Ukraine was unprovoked, a completely unprovoked attack. In that case, I think if you look deeper, there is definitely reasons for why Russia made its advance into Ukraine. And in the same way here, I think there are definitely reasons why the Palestinians have enacted this operation, this offensive. The Hamas have done this, and I think that in any conflict, there's usually reasons, two sides to a story. Anyhow, the Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, he has referred to, or named the operation Al-Aqsa Flood, and he has given reasons for this operation, being the highlighted threats and Israeli control over the Jerusalem Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is a very important mosque to the Palestinian people. Also, the continuation of the blockade of Gaza, and the possibility of Israeli normalization with other countries in the region. So this is I think one of the real reasons of why perhaps Hamas have taken these steps now. So the idea of normalization with other countries in this area is not something that the Hamas wish to see. Hamas wish to see Israel out of the area entirely, much like many of the Israeli government would now like to see the Palestinians out of Israel entirely. Would prefer to see them be displaced and move to other Arab nations. There has been talk by Netanyahu and his coalition of a desire to annex the West Bank and to make all of the West Bank area Israeli settler territory. Now, this idea of normalization of Israel with other nations and nations like Saudi Arabia, this is something which Israel would like in a way to be able to gain some sort of a support in the region from other nations because of their concerns over Iran. Now, Iran supports financially Hezbollah from Lebanon and Hamas. And the normalization of Israel, effectively having other nations in the area say Israel is fine where it is, we recognize Israel and Israel can stay like this, is not what Hamas wants to see. So perhaps people are speculating that Hamas's operation has been to draw out a response from Israel. Perhaps a response that may be seen as being heavy-handed, and the rhetoric discussed so far by Netanyahu would lead one to believe that that may be the outcome, and that Israel may be playing into this trap, if you want to think of it as a trap, and that a heavy-handed response from Israel would then disrupt the normalization sort of rapprochement that's maybe underway or being discussed between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The other day, the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic, Ali Khamenei, he stated that governments that decide to take a risk and normalize relations with the Zionists will inevitably suffer and lose. As the Europeans say, they bet on a losing horse. The current situation in Israel is a reason not to get close to it. They shouldn't make this mistake. Now, this comes after a statement last month by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He was talking to Fox News and he said that ongoing talks with Israel meant the prospect of a normalized relations were getting closer every day. Now, Saudi Arabia are discussing or negotiations to normalize their relations with Israel in return for formal defense pact with the United States and US assistance in developing a civil nuclear program. So, and this is interesting on an entirely different topic, but that even the Saudis, an oil-rich nation, are looking to utilize nuclear power for their own needs. They'd like to develop a civilian nuclear program. So, Mohammed bin Salman went on to say, when asked about what it would take to establish formal relations with Israel. He said, for us, the Palestinian issue is very important. We need to solve that part. So, again, perhaps the Hamas's thinking here is if we cause Israel to strike back too hard upon us, that will be looked unfavorably in the around the world, and this will stop Saudi Arabia pursuing this normalization process with Israel. Who knows? That's one level of speculation. Another point is that Hamas may have recognized this as being a period of weakness for Israel due to the fact that Israel's military supplies are at a decreased level. Israel Hayom, which is an Israel newspaper and website, they about 6 months ago wrote an article that American ammunition stored in Israel has been slowly being reduced over the last year and a half to provide ammunition to Ukraine. So due to the shortages the US has, they have been taking these supplies. These are American ammunition sites, American ammunition stores, but they're held on Israeli territory in Israel. And the agreement has been that they would be held there so that should Israel need them to defend themselves, like they needed to when they fought in the past with Jordan and Egypt, that those supplies would be there. Now, it appears as though those supplies have been drawn down upon, and their ability to use them in an emergency may be limited, and this perhaps may have been something that Hamas has become aware of and has seen this as being an opportunity to perhaps make an incursion into Israel, stir up panic, and perhaps have some level of military success. Now, the Palestinians and Hamas will not beat Israel. The Israeli Defense Force is one of the most powerful militaries on the planet, heavily backed by the US. And really, this is a large part for the drawing up of the Middle Eastern map in 1948, primarily by the British, to give the Jewish state in Israel, was in a way to cement Western power within this region by having friendly Israel there. Joe Biden has just come out in a response in a speech about the attacks, saying that America will never leave Israel's side, will always provide support to them. So clearly, the West, the US, has a strong interest in Israel, in making it strong, and so it does. It supports it financially. It supports it with weapons and aid of varying sorts. So that's what's going on, and perhaps that's why we've seen this attack now. It has been savage. It's been very different to the conflict in Ukraine, where we have seen two professional militaries operating as you would expect militaries to operate. In general, looking to avoid civilian casualties, targeting military facilities and primarily military targets. Here, and what we've seen in this Hamas incursion into Israel has been a very different type of fighting. You can just sense the deep-seated hatred between the Palestinians and the Israelis in this area, and that is, I believe, what has led to the savagery that we've seen. In both cases, the savage slaughter of Israelis and the savage missile striking of indiscriminately buildings within Gaza. In either case, in either side, there are people, there are children being killed. Anyhow, we'll see more about this in the coming days and weeks. How this resolves at this stage, I don't know. One way could be that Israel just inflicts massive reprisal strikes against Gaza and perhaps into the West Bank as well. They are turning off all power and water to the Gaza Strip at this stage. And they may, who knows, how far they will take it. On the other hand, we may see that Hezbollah become involved and start or increase or continue some level of conflict along the Lebanese border. And ultimately, who knows, Iran could be drawn into this. You don't know. If America is drawn into this conflict to support Israel, then we see them being split again with a focus on Ukraine for the last year and a half. Now needing to pivot here. Alexander Mikuris had a great point where he said he would not be surprised to see claims from Israel that America is partly to blame here and that America hasn't been providing the focus on the protection and security of Israel that it should have been because it's been distracted with Ukraine. So we'll wait and see. Speaking of Ukraine, moving back to Ukraine, already you can see just in terms of the headlines, it has moved away from the conflict in Ukraine and it has moved to Israel, and it will stay like that while this conflict continues. For Ukrainian President Zelensky and his hopes of achieving more weapons and funding for Ukraine, that now must have taken some sort of a blow if Israel begins to lobby the United States for support in terms of weapons, in terms of funding and aid. Then the Israeli Jewish ability to lobby in the United States is very strong. They're very well organized, very strong lobbying group for Israel, and funds and weapons will start to be diverted from Ukraine to Israel. But on to Ukraine, and in terms of what has been happening there, I'll go through the Russian Ministry of Defense daily update. And prior to yesterday's Hamas attacks, the thumbnail I was making for the video and the title for it was that the tide is turning. And that really is how I would sum up what we're seeing in the last couple of days in terms of the Ukrainian front line and the conflict there. It feels as though the momentum is shifting, that the Ukrainians are unable to continue the offensive, are falling back. It seems as though the number of Ukrainian servicemen surrendering is increasing, and the reports of Russian troops recapturing Ukrainian positions, making small advances, taking some of the hamlets they have been battling over for the last month or so. That seems to be increasing in frequency. It certainly feels as though the number of Russian successes, tactical successes in the last couple of days is on the increase. We're not seeing large, big arrow offences by any means. That isn't seemingly happening yet, but there are certainly along the whole front line pushes and successes for the Russians, and reports, as I read yesterday, from Ukrainian Telegram channels, just of the struggles that they are having holding their positions, that they are losing positions, and the Russians are advancing in areas. I'll go through the Ministry of Defence update, starting up in the north, which is this red area up here at Kupiansk. Again, reports that around this area, Sinkovka, up here, just north of Kupiansk, has been, Russians have taken more of this area here, that the Russians are blocking off or taking fire control over the supply roads into Kupiansk. In the last week, we've had reports of a number of the bridges down the Oskol River south of Kupiansk heading down to the Liman area down further south, here down the bottom of the screen. These bridges have been blown. This makes the resupply for Kupiansk and the areas to the east of Kupiansk, with inside this red line, which is the rough sort of front line, becomes much harder. Talks of Russian advances around Petropavlivka, this area here as well, and Kislivka. So certainly in this northern area, the Russians seeming to be advancing here in small tactical areas. The reporting from the Ministry of Defence says that in the Kupiansk direction, where the Zapad group of forces are operating with aircraft, artillery, and the heavy TOS-1 flamethrower systems, have repelled 5 counterattacks of the AFU. The AFU is the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The AFU 4th Tank Brigade and 66th Mechanised Brigade near Makievka in the Lugansk People's Republic, and Liman Pervy in the Kharkov region. In addition, Russian units inflicted losses on manpower and hardware of the AFU's 14th, 30th, 32nd Mechanised Brigades and the 115th Territorial Defence Brigade near Kupiansk, Sinkovka, Liman, Pervy and Ivanovka. Over 40 Ukrainian troops have been, I'm guessing here it just says over 40 Ukrainian troops, but that will have been killed or wounded. That seems to be the way that the Ministry of Defence reports these numbers. It is a summation of killed and wounded. 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 2 motor vehicles, 1 Polish-made Krab self-propelled artillery system, 1 US-made M777 artillery system were neutralised. In the Krasny Liman area, so as we move south down this red line to Liman here, Torsk here. In the Krasny Liman direction, where the centre group of forces are using army aviation and artillery, repelled 1 attack of an assault detachment of the AFU's 63rd Mechanised Brigade close to Chervenaya Dibrova. The Ukrainian losses amounted to more than 65 Ukrainian troops, 2 pickup trucks, 1 Akatsiya self-propelled howitzer, 2 D-30 and 1 D-20 howitzers. I must say that there is a continuing stream of videos on Telegram channels showing smaller and smaller numbers of Ukrainian servicemen being targeted by FPV drones, either in grenade attacks or more frequently in direct kamikaze attacks. This is an indication, I feel, that the Russians are getting the upper hand here, in that they are able to go hunting for individuals, and again, these attacks are occurring in the Ukrainian positions. These aren't when the Ukrainians are advancing in the open fields. That is also happening, but this is when they're in trenches, when they're trying to evacuate their wounded. They're just coming under this sort of, it seems almost like a relentless drone attack, And some of the Ukrainian channels too have been reporting just that fact, that they feel like there is one drone for every one of them in the sky, and the sky is just full of these Russian FPV drones. So moving down to the Donetsk area. So this is coming down south of Krasny Liman, this blue line. Here we have Soledar, here is Bakhmut. We've got Kramatorsk over here, and then if we just move the map up a little bit, Holivka, and then down to Donetsk city down here. There are reports that just under Bakhmut in Klishchiivka and Andriivka here, that the Russian forces have been able to push the Ukrainians back or out of these areas. The Ukrainians did make some progress around here, sort of making it to the train line. It seems now as though they have been pushed back off that train line and been pushed back out of these areas. In Donetsk direction, units of the Yug group of forces, supported by aviation and artillery, repelled 3 attacks of Ukrainian assault detachments near Kurdyumovka, Veseloy, and Sevenoy in the Donetsk People's Republic. The enemy losses in this direction during the day amounted to up to 190 Ukrainian troops killed and wounded, 3 motor vehicles, 1 US-made M777 artillery system, and 1 D-30 howitzer. Again, we see in terms of the numbers reportedly killed and wounded, we see a decrease here from the 300, 400 around this Donetsk area in the past to 190 yesterday. Now, moving down to South Donetsk region, so this yellow, roughly this yellow line now, from Donetsk down past Marinka, Volodar here, and then moving across to Urozhaine, Priyutny. There are reports too of strong Russian counteroffensives around Priyutny, pushing back towards Urozhaine, this area here. In South Donetsk, this is where the Vostok group of forces are operating. They have reportedly repelled 3 attacks of the Ukrainian 127th and 128th Territorial Defence Brigades. Their assault detachments close to Priyutny, so in this area around here, these fields here. Ground attack aviation and artillery launched attacks at manpower and hardware of the Ukrainian 58th Motorised Brigade and 79th Air Assault Brigade close to Urozhaine and Novomikhailovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. The enemy lost up to 225 Ukrainian troops killed and wounded. The enemy here is because this is the Russian Ministry of Defense reporting. So the Ukrainians lost up to 225 troops killed and wounded, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 2 motor vehicles, 1 D-20 howitzer, as well as 1 electronic warfare station. The electronic warfare stations, again, these are the pieces of electronic equipment that allow you to disable the enemy's drones or interfere with their communications. Again, in the reporting I read yesterday from a Ukrainian Telegram channel, they spoke of how the Russians were being very successful with their electronic warfare capabilities, able to disable the Ukrainian ability to use drones in that area. So then moving further to the west along this green line here, we now get into the Zaporozhye region, and here where the bulk of this fighting has been, Robotne and Verbove here. In the Zaporozhye direction, units of the Russian group of forces, supported by ground attack aviation and helicopters, hit units of the Ukrainian 80th Airborne Assault Brigade, 65th and 118th Mechanized Brigades near Uspanovka or Robotne. Malaya Tokmacha. Malaya Tokmacha is just up here. Up to 50 Ukrainian troops, 2 armoured fighting vehicles and 2 pickup trucks were eliminated. In the course of the counter-battery warfare, 1 M-Star-B howitzer, 1 D-20 howitzer and 1 M46 towed field gun were neutralised. So again, we still see there are here heavy artillery battles going on all along the line. The Ukrainians losing large numbers on a daily basis, anywhere between 10 and 20 pieces of artillery lost each day. The Ministry of Defense of Russia is claiming this anyhow. I can't corroborate those numbers are exactly correct, but you can, as I say, if you spend an hour looking through some of the Russian Telegram channels, it's quite easy to find ample video footage showing successful attacks on pieces of equipment and Ukrainian positions. Moving down then to the Kherson region. So moving down past the Novokhovka Reservoir area and the Dnieper River down to Kherson here. In the Kherson direction, up to 30 Ukrainian troops, 2 motor vehicles and 1 D-30 howitzer have been neutralised by Russian fire. 2 AFU sabotage and reconnaissance groups were eliminated on the islands. Now, these are these island areas around here of the Dnieper River in this area here. So, yeah, overall just a continuation of the attritional war in Ukraine, the Russians having the upper hand of it, the Ukrainians being pushed back into defensive positions. Commander Zaluzhny reportedly has said this to President Zelensky of Ukraine, that his troops need to begin to attempt to consolidate defensive positions now. Their ability to conduct the offensive is over, and if they don't produce and engineer for themselves some defensive positions, then when the expected Russian large offensive does come, they will be pushed back. So Ukrainians now looking to defend, also looking to build defensive positions in the Odessa and Mykolaiv region. There's been reports of that, as they do believe that if the Russians do go on the offensive, that Odessa will be effectively on the menu for the Russian forces, and they will look to take Odessa and then capture through to Moldova. That's it for the update today. Just a quick weekend update. I will look forward to speaking to you again during the course of the week. And I think for the next little while, these updates will be a split between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel until some sort of a conclusion for the Israel attacks is found. I'll get back to some reporting on what's happening in Africa too later this week. All right. I hope you're enjoying your weekend. I look forward to talking to you again soon.